a therapist, I have an ethical responsibility that you don't just bring in DMX's mother and surprise him that he hasn't seen for decades. You prepare him emotionally. You say, like, is it okay with you if can we try to bring in your mom? Can we see if she'd be open to a session? That was a really important part of the therapy, because we were doing real therapy. And
Yeah,
it doesn't work if it's not that. And I wouldn't have been involved.
that makes sense too. What about Alex and Simon Van Kempen?
They were a really interesting couple. And I think that they had their own kind of resistance to the process in the beginning, but ultimately they really gave themselves over to it. And I think it's pretty amazing. They're still together now. They're in Australia. And, I think that they got a lot of positive things out of it. We're still in touch on social media and stuff. And, I just think that I think it was a great experience for them. And I'm really thrilled about that.
That's great. What about keeping it in the reality world for a minute? Let's just take Tom Sandoval and Ariana Madix. This couple from Vanderpump Rules. I don't know how familiar you are with all these people. I mean, I know you live in.
I don't watch Vanderpump, but I think I met them on What Happens Live like a
Not
hundred
sure
years
how.
ago.
Yeah.
Like I was the bartender and they were on the show. But if you give me a little history, I can get into it with you.
This is right. So I'm gonna give you history for all of these little things. So, because I just assume, I don't know, you live in Beverly Hills, so you might know all of this. But right, so they dated for 9 years approximately, and they lived together. And then his phone fell out of his pocket. She picked it up. The bottom line is she discovered he was cheating. So, I mean,
Wasn't it with someone else who was on the show?
someone else who was on the
Yeah.
show, this girl named Raquel, now Rachel. So, what is it about cheating? Like, is it like truly? Because then Tom did profess, I just didn't have a minute to sit down, and I knew this was going to be a long conversation and to break up with you. I mean, is it like, what is it? Like, why do people cheat? Are they afraid to have these hard conversations? It usually ends the same way, that you're going to end up not with this person.
Well, there are a lot of different reasons why people cheat. And, look, there are some people, and it's a smaller percentage, that just cheat because of the sex. But that's a really, believe it or not, a small percentage. There's a guy named um, M. Gary Newman, and M. Gary Newman did one of the longest, most significant studies of couples who cheat versus couples who don't. And he had, I think it was like 500 couples who cheated and 500 who didn't. And first he studied men who cheat, and then he studied women who cheat. And what he found was that it was something like, I think for men, it was 97% of the time, for women 98% of the time. The reason why they cheated was because of a lack of emotional connection in the relationship, a combination of that with a lack of emotional and sexual. It was only 3% of the time, or 2%, depending on the gender, that it was just because of sex. And I think that we have this idea, oh, it's just sex. And I think to cheat for 9 years, or however many years it was, is also a different animal than someone who, oops, I screwed up. Like I got drunk, my inhibitions were down. This is terrible. And it's not to say that's okay. That's not okay. Anytime you break your commitment to your partner, it's devastating. But that is a whole other level. To look someone that you supposedly love in the eye day after day and live a whole secret life is a whole other thing.
And they did it for less than 9 years. They dated for 9 years. But yes,
Yeah.
he cheated. I mean, really, and we'll get into Erica in a second, but that's really what Erica went through, right? I mean, to like be married to someone and then wake up and realize that they're just a whole different person than you thought they were. That's
And
gotta be.
it's incredibly devastating anytime you find out your partner is not who you thought that they were. I mean, that's not specific to housewives, that's anybody. And you'd be amazed at how many people have that experience.
Well, that's scary.
Yeah.
What about, because
You're like,
Tom,
I'm staying single. I'm
right.
going
Well,
with
I
the
mean,
single thing.
yes, I was trying to not make this about me, but that is
Yeah.
exactly what I was going to say. I was
I
like,
saw it flash before your
I was
eyes.
like, no, I am
Yeah.
aware, like I have gone to therapy. I haven't gone in a long time, but I know like repetition compulsion and all. Like I think I did some good work, and not to say that I know everything, but I'm usually aware, like I'm able to call myself out on my own bullshit, like when I am like I'm kind of self-aware, so
Yeah.
I kind of, doesn't mean I really want to do the work and get under the hood of the car, but at least I'm aware of what I'm doing at the moment.
Yeah.
So that's that. But what about, because Tom and Ariana, after this breakup, they had to go back like last season of Vanderpump Rules, season 11. They actually had to work together. Now,
Mm.
Ariana refused to speak to him like the whole season. So we have a season where like these two people are not speaking to each other. Producers allowed it. It worked out, for the show. I don't know if it worked out for the show actually, but how does that, like, you break up? And I mean, how do people, what if you have to work with your ex? I mean, there's other people, they live in the same building, like in New York, you break up with someone that lives
Or
upstairs
you get a
and
divorce and you have to continue to co-parent with someone, and
right.
that's rough. And look, it sounds like she did a great job making boundaries, and good for her for saying, like, I'm not going to talk to you. I may have to be in this situation with you, but I am protecting myself, and I am going to make sure that I have my own back, since you clearly did not. And I could understand that. That sounds like it was a really healthy choice for her, even if the show may have suffered. Like, good for her for taking care of herself. But I think in the big picture of people who still have to work with their exes, co-parent with their exes, it's incredibly challenging. And I think that it takes a lot of therapy to be able to work through your own resentments and kind of come to a place. Like, I think there's a lot of focus for most people about like forgiving other people. Like, oh, do you forgive that person? To me, a lot of the time, the work is about forgiving yourself for picking that person, forgiving yourself for not paying attention to the red flags that you saw, forgiving yourself for continuing the relationship or for putting up with things. And when you're able to forgive yourself, that brings you a whole lot more peace, that makes it way more possible if you are in a situation where you have to co-parent or work with that person. And I encourage anyone who's in that situation to do that work, ideally with the therapist.
Yeah, that's usually me. I really don't get mad at anyone else. Like I am so easy on the entire world. You do you, I don't care, but I am hard on myself. So I get that. It's like you're mad at yourself for like, why didn't I see these? That totally makes sense.
And a lot of the time it's both. And, there are some things, and, I have a little bit of a different perspective than most therapists. And I talk about it in my book, The Relationship Fix, because I have a whole chapter about making amends and forgiving. And I think that we are in a society that puts a lot of pressure on people to forgive, that like, oh, you have to forgive and let it go. And we have this kind of religious history in our country of like, forgiveness is godly and we have to do it. But I think that there are a lot of different ways to forgive. And I think that